Join leading communicators in a frank debate about the stories, narratives, mediums, and methods that are essential to changing behaviors, changing priorities, and making that change stick. What will it take to transform this moment of global upheaval into one of movement building to create the world we need?
Session, turning a moment into a movement. My name is Zinhle Essamuah. I'm a host and correspondent at NowThis News, which is a digital news agency where I host our daily evening news show, NowThis. I think it's very clear to each of us that 2020 has been struck by many moments, right? A global pandemic. We've seen racial reckoning in the US and abroad, and renewed calls for climate action as the oceans and the skies have been clearing. And so I think a lingering question amid these many moments in action is how can we sustain positive movement, specifically toward reaching our SDG goals? How can we also overcome the challenges of the moment, like misinformation and inequity, to sustain positive movement in our world? We're going to talk about all of that this morning, and I'm really excited to be joined by a stellar panel of all women. Hello, we can all say hi, good morning, of media mavens who are just change makers in the world of communication, media, and entertainment. This morning, I'm joined by Solitaire Townsend, co-founder of Futerra. As co-founder, she advises governments, charities, and brands, including Google, IKEA, and the United Nations, on imagining a better future and making it happen. Futerra has offices in London, Stockholm, New York, and Mexico City, and her new book, The Happy Hero: How to Change Your Life by Changing the World, is out now. Georgia Arnold also joins us. She is the executive director of MTV Sugar. Georgia is the foundation's executive director and is responsible for leading the entire team and driving all elements of the foundation's operations. She is also SVP of Social Responsibility for MTV Networks International. MTV Sugar is a miniseries of 5-minute episodes where we see characters from different countries connect via video call as they navigate the new normal of COVID-19. We're also joined by Melinda Ahrens. She's the SVP of Social Impact at Participant Media. She is instrumental in building campaigns in support of the company's social impact strategy. Ahrens started her career at Fox News and spent 12 years at ABC News as a producer for Good Morning America and Nightline. Since the 2016 election, Ahrens has consulted the International Rescue Committee and Lincoln Square Productions, the long-form unit of ABC News. Tatiana Foya also joins us. She is a Girl Up teen advisor and 16-year-old advocate for gender equality, community engagement, and climate change. She was born in Manhattan, New York, but raised in the British Virgin Islands. Since primary school, Tatiana has been an active member of her school, her church, her local and global communities, and she founded the first ever Girl Up chapter in the British Virgin Islands. And last but not least, we're joined by Natasha Wansa. Natasha is the youngest recipient of the Global Health Leaders Award worldwide, awarded by the World Health Organization in recognition of her work in adolescent health. Natasha is a powerful and influential Zambian 18-year-old girl who speaks out on issues affecting the health and well-being of young people. Wow, I'm already tired. What a powerful panel. Welcome. Thank you all for joining. And so in journalism, we believe in beginning with the lead, right? Let's start with the most important point. And so I would love if we just go through and I have each of you finish this sentence. It's a little long, but I think it'll help guide us. It's, I believe blank is the secret to moving audiences from watching stories and moments unfold to mobilizing and joining movements because, and then explain to us, why do you think that is? So Natasha, I'd love to start with you. What do you believe is the secret to get audiences to move into action?
Okay, thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here, to be joined by an amazing audience such as those joining us, as well as to be on the panel with such amazing women today. So I believe the secret to this actually is as simple as mentorship. And when I talk about mentorship, I mean intergenerational mentorship. So intergenerational dialogue is something that we hear about a lot. And like my introduction has told you, I am big on young people. I believe young people are the key that the world needs to actually unlock so much potential and creating the change we want to see. But then it's very difficult for young people to move from just knowing that they have this potential and actually realizing this potential without some form of help. And this help has to be done in form of mentorship. So we see all these amazing people on panels, on discussions. We see them changing the world. We see their stories on the news, and everything we see what they do. But then an understanding of how they do it and the training on how to also be able to do it is very, very important and vital, especially for young people. This helps us know just what to do exactly if we want to create the change for now, as well as prepare those for later. So for me, honestly, it's intergenerational mentorship. It's a solution that we haven't explored a lot yet, but we really need to. And if we talk about sustainability, if we talk about sustainability, honestly, it's about leadership. It's about transferring one thing to another, ensuring that this generation doesn't suffer as well as the next. And leadership is one of the most important things. But the hallmark of leadership, beyond just results, is being able to produce people who can produce the same results. So honestly, for me, intergenerational mentorship. Teach us how to do it as well, and we will do it. So it's not just seeing, but understanding how to do it and being able to do it too.
Well, thank you so much, Natasha. I think that's powerful, especially as we look at our intergenerational panel as well. Melinda, I'd love to hear from you. What do you believe is the secret to moving audiences into action?
Well, it's not fair for me to have to follow Natasha on anything because it's impossible to match her infectious energy and that wonderful answer, but I will try. So I believe proximity and character move audiences when it comes to storytelling, because I think what storytelling, and specifically film, television, media, long form storytelling allows people to do is to become proximate to an issue that they have no personal experience of. And you become proximate through a character that you identify with, someone who you might never come into contact with in your daily life. So it takes you out of your personal bubble experience, and it makes you, it puts you smack down into the story of someone else and lets you walk in their shoes. And I think until people can do that and understand that, that's why I think it's such a movement building force of nature, because until people can do that, especially in this day and age where you really walk around in your own completely self-created media bubble, it forces you to reckon with a different experience, understand a different experience, and move you to action. And we see this over and over and over again in every single movement. I think it's probably the most powerful thing that storytelling can do.
Thank you so much. And I think I've never heard it framed that way. Proximity really is what stories give us and spur to action. Next, I'd love to hear from Tatiana. I believe blank is the secret to moving audiences from watching moments unfold to mobilizing. What's your take?
I completely agree with Melinda and Natasha, but I feel like personal experience also helps bring that exposure and that connectivity to what you see on the screen. I feel like when you can relate, relatability is so important, especially in this day and age. So I feel as though once you can connect with an audience, even if you don't necessarily go through the same exact experience, your experience will ultimately influence the way that you are going to take the information that you're receiving.
Absolutely. I think experience is so key in making sure that we practically understand how to move forward. Georgia, what's your take?
Well, thank you. And I think what's really interesting is how I think we're building on each other's answers, and none of us have heard each other's answers yet. For me, I think that it's about harnessing the power of visibility. I think is so crucial, and that's the secret to how we can move audiences. And the reason that it is because, number one, representation matters, and representation is so important. Number two, we can engage audiences in the real challenges of their lived experiences. And then finally, if we can do all of that, it means that all of us are so much better equipped with the tools that we need in order to deliver meaningful change. And that's through our storytelling.
Absolutely. And I think it's powerful that you said, yes, none of these things are mutually exclusive from each other. They each build one on top of the other. And that's really how we get the momentum for a movement. Solitaire, I'd love your final thoughts on this sentence.
Oh, thanks. And it's hard to go last because absolutely with everything that's been said. Let me make up a word. So I believe that solutionists are the secret. The characters, the people who are making the answers right now. And the reason why I believe those solutionists, not necessarily the solutions, but the people who are making and creating the solutions are the answer, is because all of our history of storytelling on this planet has been interested in heroes versus villains. And if climate change is the villain, if inequity is the villain, if racism is the villain, then we need to have some heroes to root for. So yeah, I think solutionists, heroes, the people such as those on this call and those who are watching, everyone who's watching right now is a hero as well. I think those are the stories that we want to watch.
That's so powerful. And I think we'll all start incorporating solutionists into our vocabulary. And so I want to jump now into Q&A. And Solitaire, let's start with you. I love that you said it's about not just about the problem and the people, the actual solution, but the people behind that, the people behind the movements. I know that you're the co-founder of Futerra, which focuses on sustainable development. And I know that when it comes to sustainability, the actions of individuals aren't enough, right? We need like larger corporate action. And so how would you say we can practically tell the stories needed to engage wider, broader constituencies beyond just individuals?
So I think we have individuals, and then we have communities, and then we have culture, and culture is always forgotten. We always talk about institutions and people on the culture which we're a part. But I was reflecting, so earlier this week, I was talking to a young climate campaigner, part of the Fridays for Future. Futerra did the advertising campaign for the Fridays for the Future March last year. She's a woman of colour in the US, and right now she feels completely overwhelmed, utterly overwhelmed, in grief, in anger, in hope, in thrill of the change, and also with this massive sense of responsibility right now that everything that she does matters, because it feels like we're at this pivot moment. And, you know, I've been doing this for 30 years, and she was asking me, you know, wow, how do you cope with this feeling all the time? And I had to tell her, I don't have this feeling all the time. I haven't had that for the last year. I am having it now. I also thrilled and full of hope and overwhelmed. And that's because we're at a moment in time. Now, those of us who know stories and how stories are put together is we kind of know the hero's journey. And there's a point in the hero's journey when you hit a crossroads, a crisis. By the way, that's absolutely based on psychology, and what individual psychologists tell us is called the crisis curve of when you're facing an addiction or a crisis, you do go through that journey. And it's the same thing that sociologists tell us whole cultures and communities go through, this journey of crisis that leads to a crossroads. Now, I've written about the crossroads in my book, The Happy Hero. I've been watching it for years. I didn't quite realize we were going to trip over a global pandemic and land in the crossroads face down, which is what we've done, this global moment. I thought the global moment was going to be climate change. Turns out the global moment came early with the pandemic. But when we're in a crossroads, when we're standing at that point, we're actually going forward the way we've gone before is no longer an option. There's three ways out. There's straight down, denial, crisis, social breakdown, climate crisis. There's trying to adapt and trying to keep things going the way they were, which unfortunately also goes down because going forward isn't possible. But there's also up. There's also the positive way out, where you can come out of these crises better than the way you went in, fairer, more equitable, with more energy. You know, when we think about climate change, all the solutions to climate change solve everything else. So this moment that we're in really matters. And the one thing we've got to know in this moment is that not everybody is like us. You know, everyone on here knows multiple audiences. I slice them down into three groups. There's three groups of people that I talk to. There's people who I call greens, who live in a big world. They're interested in global issues, in sea level rise, in global pandemics. They think globally, and they're the greens, and they really like change and new things. Then there's the bricks, who think really locally. The whole rest of the world's almost mythology. They think about their local community, where they live, and they don't like change. And in the middle, there's the golds, and the golds want to be socially acceptable. They want to be cool. They want people to think well of them. And what you can imagine when we're talking, when we're telling these stories, if we're only ever telling the stories to the greens, to the people interested in big global issues and change, we're going to completely ignore the bricks or even scare them because they don't like change and they only care about the local community. And also, if we don't make it desirable, those goals, they're going to go where things look cool and where things are socially acceptable. So we've got to take those with us as well.
That's so good. And I know that you clearly advise lots of governments and charities and brands. So I wonder, you've talked to us about what follows these seasons of change, but what do you advise when we're in it? Like when we're in the turbulence, how do we not get overtaken by the moment so that we can actually move?
So right now at the moment, you've got most multinational businesses in the world, for all of their sins, and there are many, have suddenly realized they might be as much of a victim of this stuff as a cause of it. So they're taking it seriously and they're working on it, sometimes much more than governments. Lots of individuals, community groups growing up, and NGOs. And when you're in this moment, when you're at the crossroads, you're really open to advice, good and bad. So that it's possible, remember, it's possible to go down as well as up. You become very open. All the old rules, suddenly we're in a new normal, and you're very open to advice, good and bad. So what I would say is, at the moment, be aware of your emotional context, that you're overwhelmed and scared and everything's changed, and know that emergency decision making isn't always good. And then plot, because passion is not enough. We cannot just keep expending our passion, spilling our heart out constantly, raging against the problem. We got to sit down and we got to work out A, B, C, D, E. How are we going to walk up that path? What are the steps we need to make? And actually, so basically what I say is, sit down when you're at the most afraid, most angry, most thrilled. Sit down and write yourself a to-do list of what are the actions to get us the next step up on that path towards the good outcome. And then as well as telling people why they need to change, tell people specifically what you think that you need them to do.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Solitaire. And Georgia, I'd love to pivot to you, because I think that MTV Sugar did a wonderful job of adapting to the moment of COVID. So could you just tell us a bit about how the series came to be and how you all handled and responded to this pandemic?
So I thank you very much. And I run, the MTV Staying Alive Foundation. And the foundation's remit is around storytelling to change lives. So MTV Sugar is a behavior change campaign that's been going for over 11 years now. And when global lockdown happened, our first thought is, how do we think about the future? And then, of course, I went to sleep and had a dream. And I dreamt that all of the MTV Sugar cast and characters from previous series were talking to each other on Zoom. And I woke up in the morning, true story, I remembered my dream, and I messaged my team and I said, I know exactly what we have to do.
That's amazing.
It is crazy. I do have some crazy dreams. And this one actually turned out really well, because it was like, well, how do we use our behavior change model to address the biggest global health issue in the world? And previously, MTV Sugar has been about addressing HIV, reproductive health, gender-based violence. So how could we turn that to COVID? Our challenge was we had a very limited budget. In fact, up until that point, I had no money at all in order to make this. And we had a very limited time to do it because we were in global lockdown and the world needed messages now. So I managed to find some money. So thanks to Unitaid and Every Woman, Every Child and Tarsadia Foundation and UNICEF, we found some money. Within a 10th of the time that we would normally produce a big 13 episode series, we managed to produce 70 daily episodes. We worked in 5 countries across the world, so Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Cote d'Ivoire, and the US. Oh, and a little bit in Botswana as well. Sorry, Botswana. All of the scripts were written 10 days before the episode was due to premiere. So that meant that because the lockdown was changing and the regulations in each country was changing, we were able to adapt as fast as we could. And we edited 72 hours before it went on air, and then had to get it all subtitled. I mean, we were working 7 days a week. Our actors were suddenly their own production crew. They were doing their own hair and makeup. We had to recce through Zoom. I mean, it was all filmed on Zoom and mobile. So we would recce their homes, check out what clothes they'd be wearing. They had to do their own makeup, their own clapperboards. We totally invented a new way of working. And I think, what was important was to cover all of the messages. So not just COVID, but hand washing, spacing, quarantining, but also gender-based violence, mental health issues, and the misinformation. So we crammed that into all of our episodes. And I think what COVID showed us is this spectrum of different ways of working. You know, up until COVID, I had a way of working, and that was if you said, you know, I'm going to give you a fifth of the budget and can you produce this? I'd be like, forget it. And now we can know we can do things in different ways. What we did was have real digital depth. So we worked with Facebook, we had a website, we did polling. And we saw that through Facebook polling, a randomized poll, 89% of young people who watched MTV Sugar, and these were in Nigeria and South Africa, 89% said they'd learned something about COVID because of watching MTV Sugar Alone Together. So it was a learning, it was incredible, and it came out of, unfortunately, COVID, but, you know, out of stress and distress comes creativity, I think.
Absolutely. And I think it's clear that it had an influence, as you said, the polling showed, on public perception of the pandemic. Why do you think it was so important to meet people where they were and engage in platforms that they were actively in? And by that, I mean, the show format pivoted basically to Zoom. Why does it matter how we reach audiences beyond just the substance?
I think we always talk about the fact that when we produce our content, we're always reflecting back the lives of our audience. And that's really crucial. So when our lives suddenly become constricted to this square box on our computer screens, which we're still all living in it now, we had to be able to show that. And, you know, I will be honest and say, if you watch MTV Sugar Alone Together, it's not the high quality production values and drone shots and, you know, 10 cameras that we would have in a previous series. But what we're seeing is our reality today. And on the occasion when lockdown started to relax, and in South Africa, we got some of the actors to film outside and you saw blue sky, it felt, you suddenly realized how claustrophobic the show is, because that's out of necessity, and we're seeing our lives reflected back. And what we saw, we did live comments every single night. We did live chat. And at first, everybody was like, oh, here's my favorite character, and complaining the episodes were too short. But what we saw eventually was they came around and said, you know, when a character died from COVID, a lot of the audience was saying, this has just happened to me. I haven't been able to go to my father's funeral in the same way we reflected that on the screen. And when we had the gender-based violence storyline and an unplanned pregnancy, we were getting young people relating to the storylines and also giving the characters advice of what they should be doing. And that was the sort of conversations we wanted to see happening.
That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing your insights from producing such a great show. And so now I'd love to speak to Tatiana. Thank you for joining us. This year, you were selected to join the Girl Up Teen Advisors class of 2020. And so you're no stranger to mobilizing in your own communities. What opportunity do you see in the current moment to encourage more people to just join in this movement to reaching SDGs?
Well, I think having such a platform as this, where we have different panels, diverse panels, with amazing women, as well as different people from around the world, speak on their experiences and their insights and their expertise, I feel like having this accessible to all people is the first step. Ensuring that people can then do something with the information that they receive on the panel is the next step. So as Solitaire mentioned, having specific, direct, attainable things and tasks that they can do in their own communities, but making it something that it's not necessarily a task, but something that they will enjoy because they realize how powerful their voice and their action is within their space. So I feel as though, one, ensuring that these sort of conversations are facilitated and accessible to all, and then two, ensuring that we encourage and influence people to then do something about what they learned.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that this is an intergenerational panel. And so I want to hear from you. What do you think adults just aren't getting when it comes to mobilizing people, whether it's people generally or young people specifically?
That's a great question. I feel as though adults, we need to, as Natasha mentioned, having this sort of intergenerational movement needs to ensure that everyone, irrespective of their gender, irrespective of their age, has a platform or an opportunity to speak. I feel as though even people who you think might not have the greatest idea, have you reached out to them yet? Have you listened to what their story is? you might be surprised what you will hear. And that can trickle into different sectors of whether it's the SDGs or if it's just something local. But I feel like you need to ensure that you listen to all voices, because you can be empowered, and you shouldn't be sexist, you shouldn't be ageist, you shouldn't be, it shouldn't have any discrimination, because every voice matters.
Thank you so much. And I think that's a great segue to Melinda, who is with Participant Media. And I think social activism is at the core of Participant, and Participant reaches so many audiences. I think for people who aren't familiar, most recently, the film's premiere of On the Basis of Sex, which told the story of the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Participant with the ACLU created a toolkit where individuals could learn more about how they can fight for gender inequality. And I feel like that's a great example of taking a piece of entertainment and using it to inform and mobilize people. And so for you, Melinda, why is it important to go beyond simply informing people or entertaining them? Why is activation an important part of your work? I'm not sure, Melinda, can you hear me?
I'm so sorry. It keeps going in and out. You seem to be back, but I completely missed what you said. So I'm
no worries. We're working in the era of COVID.
Being like, everything froze.
Oh, no, it's all good. So my question for you is simply, Participant clearly creates so much powerful media and entertainment, but why is it important for you all to go beyond just informing people and entertaining them, but actually activating them? I know you all have created toolkits with your films. Talk to us about that.
We do major, we're in the middle of several major impact campaigns right now, including one for our film John Lewis Good Trouble about the late Congressman Lewis, focused on voting rights throughout the South, specifically in Georgia. So we choose essentially of our slate of films. We probably make somewhere between 5 to 10 projects a year, either film or television series. And then we choose among those which ones we feel, we always want to do something sort of impact related and amplifying it to, affected communities as much as possible, no matter what. So we never just put a film out and don't do anything impact related with it. But then there is sort of a spectrum. And then some films that we believe are just so urgent and perfect for the moment. We do put, a lot of staff and resources behind full-blown impact campaigns, leveraging that content. And the reason for that is really, as simple as our founder, Jeff Skoll, who, created Participant when he created the Skoll Foundation, which I'm sure many people watching are familiar with. He believes strongly that a story well told can change the world, and that, there's sort of 2 points of impact or 2 points of potential change. One is just the creation and distribution of the content. So we were talking yesterday about, we're an entirely partnership-based model, even if you look at the filmmaking side. So it's really interesting because I know that this session is all about sort of interesting, unexpected partnerships. And, I really believe strongly that that model is what makes Participant very unique and special and distinguishes us. So, initially we partner with the artists. So if we can't get world-class storytellers to come on board with us and share their stories with us, they have a million options, right? I mean, there's no shortage of people who want to work with Alfonso Cuarón or any of these amazing talents. And so part of it is being a place where artists feel safe at home, and that, a huge distinguishing factor is these artists want their content very consciously to make change out in the world. So they want a company that's going to try and do that, is going to put resources into that. Then we partner very closely with distributors because, if it, as something, Georgia knows so well, the scale and the opportunity to be distributed widely is just a huge benefit to actually leveraging content to make change. If our CEO always says, if no one sees your movie, you can't make change with it. So we're incredibly blessed and lucky that we work very hard on our distributor relationships, and we work with all of the big ones, HBO, Netflix, all the major studios. And then there's sort of our part of the house, which comes in, which for us on the impact side is the most crucial, which is our impact partners. So for example, example, John Lewis Good Trouble is just one that's going on right now and is so urgent because the election is in 40 days. And so for that, we're working, not even pre-COVID, we as an organization could not be on the ground in Georgia registering and turning out disenfranchised voters. So, but that is what this content speaks to. And so then it's the kind of partner choosing process and matchmaking process for the campaign is hugely important. So we're working with incredible partners on the ground in Georgia, Civic Georgia, NAACP of Georgia, Black Voters Matter. And what's most important there is making sure that they are empowered to use the content for their purposes to build their capacity. Because we're just, again, even if we were in a pre-COVID world and able to fly all over, we are never going to be the people on the ground. We are not the subject matter experts. It's our job to empower the subject matter experts, make sure that they have access to the content and that it can reach those audiences. So back to your original question about why do we feel it's so important, I think it really has to do with, again, our founder who clearly is, an incredible activist and leader in social entrepreneurship with the foundation, but his belief that storytelling can create change. He wants to make the stories, but also make sure that those stories get out to the right audiences, and that's kind of what our mission and our pledge to our filmmakers is.
That's so good. And I think you just touched on so much, right? It's not just about consuming, it's about mobilizing. We need to make sure that it's not people flying in and saying, this is a story we need to tell, but relying on the real subject matter experts. And with that, I want to pivot to Natasha. I think you've been very, very vocal that young people need to be at the table right now. And so I want to ask you, do you think that we're telling the right stories in this moment? And if so, or if not, who needs to be with us telling stories?
Okay, so thank you so much for that question, and I have really learned a lot from everything that everyone else has said. Are we telling the right stories? I think there are a lot more stories that we could tell, and there's a procedure that we must follow. There's a whole process that we must follow to be able to actually tell these stories. And I do love that all of us here have worked somehow with the media in some way. I have been with an NGO. Actually, my main training as an advocate and an activist came from an NGO when I was 12, and they deal with the media. They trained me in the media, and right now I'm actually studying to be in a media and communications class as well as a political science class. So it is very important to be able to identify what stories do need to be told. But then, as everyone else has mentioned, there is a process that is very necessary to be followed, and I am just going to give my opinion on that as well. And the first thing that I really think that we need to focus on is informing. And like you said, it goes beyond informing. The actions that we need to take are very necessary, but then we will not be able to take those actions without the information that's been laid out. And this information is going to be given to us through storytelling, of course, like everyone else has mentioned. But then the importance of storytelling is not just so that people can be amazed and wowed at what, people like Tatiana at a young age have been able to achieve. That is very important. But then the goal is to be able to know that it's the exposure that comes. If Tatiana can do it, then another girl can also do it at the age of 14. If this one can, so it's about the exposure that comes with it and letting us know that we can all break these barriers. But then it also brings hope, because trust me, this generation more than anything needs hope. It needs hope to hold on to. Those are the stories we need to hear. Hope is one of the key things that many people are lacking right now, because it feels like everything is just on lockdown. Many lives, unemployment, this and that. But then if we can see these heroines doing great things at a young age, at different ages, knowing that no matter what the age is, as long as you want to change the world, then you can do it, then we really have to invest in informing people that it is very possible. The second thing we need to do is invest. Investing in the sense of one of the pivotal sources of this investment that has to be done is education. One thing that we need to realize is that the standard, for instance, if we talk about gender equality, this is just an example. The standard isn't what men can do, women can do as well. It is what you can do as an individual, and ensuring that society can come together to support you to realize your potential. And the only key and the only source that can actually help us do this is education. Not the only, but one of the most important keys and sources is education. If we can target the education system from young ages to even older generations, honestly, education is for everyone. If we can target it and shape it from there, then we'll be able to invest in the lives of many people, and they'll be able to realize their potential. And this investment goes beyond just education. It's technology. We wouldn't be able to talk like this without all these technology innovations and the like that have been going on. It's also money. Let's not deny it. We do need money to run these movements. Money is very necessary. And if it isn't allocated, we can't ignore the conversation about money. It's probably the most important thing. And so we need to be able to realize that if it is really a priority, then let's put our money where our mouth is at. And then finally, it's training people to be able to handle all these movements, training them for what really is coming on board, training them for what it will mean to actually be on the street holding placards or lobbying with governments. We need to train people. People will not just look at something and understand and know what to do. They need to be trained. And this is an investment we need to take. The other thing is to involve them. I do love that this is an intergenerational dialogue. You know, we have so many different partners, different players, but then we need to understand that involvement is just beyond a panel discussion. It is in decision-making tables. It is involving people from a planning phase to the implementation phase to the evaluation stage. It is involving people and asking them what they want, and then being able to come to a compromise and an agreement and say, okay, this is what we can provide together. One of the greatest things that we actually need to realize is sometimes we have our own agenda, so much so we view from our own perspective what we've gone through, but then when we go on the ground we forget to ask people, what do you want? What exactly is the sort of story that you want to tell at the end of this project? And that can help us get the perspective of it. Also involve people, let them tell you their stories as well. We could learn a lot from that. Okay, just have 3 more points. I know I'm taking a little bit more time, but then it's also about imparting, you know, it's away from training, it's also sharing your experiences. I've learned a lot already just from hearing this panel with all that they've gone through. It's experience sharing, wisdom sharing, so that we don't have to go through the same things that they've gone through. I remember when the COVID-19 period, the pandemic just hit us, I spoke to the overall, she was the president of Women Deliver at the time, and I was confused. I was like, I don't know how to run the foundation, because I run the foundation, the Natasha Mwansa Foundation. I don't know how to run it without any physical activities. The government has shut us down. What am I going to do? And she gave me step-by-step guidance on how exactly to do it. And right now, the foundation grew from 20 members to over 200 members from all over the world. And that's just an example of what experience sharing, lessons learned, and wisdom can actually do for the younger generation, all those around us. Then finally, inclusion and investigation. Include as many people as possible. Tatiana mentioned it. Don't just look at one specific people. Partnership is about everyone, but then also investigate, data analysis. What has worked? What hasn't worked? Let's put those figures in order, and don't just let them be numbers. Let them tell a story as well, so that we can create a map out of that as well. So inform, invest, involve, impart, include, and investigate. So yeah, thank you.
Good. So good. Honestly, this has been so informative. I have like chills. I want to go back and look at my notes because this was such a wonderful discussion. And I think you all just so perfectly captured what is required to take the many moments that we take in and see and turn it into real sustained movement. So I just want to thank you all both for the work that you do every single day in your roles, but also for sharing all of your wisdom here. I want to make sure the audience knows we were all hyping each other up before this started. And so I think that's also a key part of this work, right? Encouraging each other and maintaining hope, even amid many challenges. And so I want to thank you all for joining us. Make sure you follow all of these speakers and myself online. And I think we're going to want to continue these conversations going. So stay safe, stay well, and thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.